Graham Crew, you've been in the job for about a month and a half now. How are you settling in?
I'm having a great time, Peter. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. Enjoying getting to know the team, getting more in depth on the project, getting across the PFS, the exploration work that's in front of us. So yeah, I'm having a great time.
Good. All right. And you were on site literally this week.
Yeah, I was in Helsinki this week. We were doing some mine closure workshops, essentially bringing the EIA and the PFS and just making sure everyone's kind of on the same page of where we're heading with the studies.
Okay. All right. Interesting time for you to be joining because you're basically at the end of this PFS stage now, because originally it was potentially coming out at the end of this year. I think now it's being pushed into Q1 of 2025, right? But essentially you've come in mid-October. I guess you're looking at almost a finished product. How much more room is there for you to have your own influence on this thing?
I think the key thing for me now is to get the PFS completed. I think there's probably some tweaks and work that we can do between the pre-feasibility and the feasibility study when that goes. But I think it's important to finish this piece of work, get it out in the market, let people understand what it is we're planning, the changes from previous studies, how much more has been developed on Ikkari. So I really want to just get this tied up, get it start being able to talk about it. Then we can talk to more updated numbers, we can talk to updated cash flows, we can talk to updated costs, etc. So I'm really looking forward to getting that done. As you say, we're probably just trying to bring all those final pieces together now, and sort of early in the new year we'll publish that and be able to talk to it.
Good. All right. I think there's a few different things I want to talk to you about today. Obviously, you're the new guy at the helm, and I wanted to talk about your background and whatnot. I know you've done a few interviews already, and you've discussed that, so we don't have to go into too much detail. The other side, I guess, is really just looking more forward onto the build of Ikkari now.
Yes.
Just to remind people of Ikkari, obviously this was discovered in 2020.
Yeah.
Agnico's almost 20% share. Oh no, 14%.
14.5%
shareholder.
Yeah.
Very,
so sort of that kind of range, 14% range. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is arguably one of the best gold discoveries discovered in Europe in generations, and really within the last 10, 20 years, one of the most significant gold discoveries globally. It seems like you're coming in now really to get the job done. You're here to finish it off and get the thing in production.
Well, I think there's a change of focus, and I think one of the great legacies that James, my predecessor, I think they've done a fantastic job on exploration. They've been very methodical about it, and it's delivered Ikkari, as you say, 4 million ounce deposit, plus 2 grams. It's a very good deposit. I saw it compared to Hemi in Western Australia this week. So and to have that, discovery hole in March 2020, to now have it 96% indicated in terms of the resource that we've published. It's a phenomenal effort by the team. I think with me coming in, one of the things that James said to me very clearly in this process was, look, I'm not a mine builder, I'm not a mine operator. It's time to hand those keys over to someone who has that experience. So, and that's one of the things I saw. The board has renewed. You've got some people on the board that have developed operations before. You've got me coming in that's got that more operator background. So, it's a bit of a change, but it's to get these studies done, to get the permitting in place, and for me, that path to cash flow, that de-risking, is where the value growth will come from.
Okay, so one of the main things as well is obviously Rupert was always seen as this very efficient exploration play. Even when they found Ikkari, right, it was always seen as we're going to go out and find more of these things. Is that still the philosophy that you want to harbour within the company, or is it now really more focused on Ikkari?
Yeah, I think I've used the expression we need to walk and chew gum.
Yeah.
I think we can do both things at once, and I think that the IP that's been set up with the team, the methodical approach to the exploration, has been very successful, and I think that's something that we need to continue. The one thing I really believe about that central Lapland belt is it's early days, and as we get in and mine things, we'll learn more about how the structural setting and the how the ore bodies are formed and where they sit. So, I'm excited about the exploration potential as much as I am about building Ikkari. The challenge is Ikkari is such a good deposit. Anything else you find, if it was 1,000 kilometres away and it was sitting on its own, people would be more excited about it. But because you've had all of that excitement on Ikkari, everything else doesn't look as exciting. But I think we just need to keep being methodical, and those things will become deposits and mines in their own rights in time.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because you often, once or twice a year, you'll put a hole out, which is a couple of 100 meters of 4 grams or whatever, and the market look at it and think, another one of them, is it? But whereas anywhere else in the world, you're right, would just completely.
Yeah, or 1 to 2 meters that they've drilled through
the
a
bonanza
nugget
stuff that you found as well.
So there's a lot of potential. What I've seen so far is a lot more what I would term traditional narrow vein type deposits that will take more drilling to get them into resource. But there's more out there.
Okay, well, why don't we talk about building Ikkari, and then we can talk about a bit more about the exploration and potentially how that could look. But your past experience, obviously, you've built mines in WA. You've then had a lot of experience in Africa, sort of more operational enhancement or turnarounds, and then you were managing the investment side of things or looking at investment opportunities for La Mancha. Here's one to throw you under the bus. Would you have invested in Rupert if you were with your investment hat on, looking at the outside?
Yeah, I think La Mancha had looked at Rupert from their perspective. It was a little bit early stage. I think that investment model is more to come in when to catalyse things when you're looking to build, etc. If you look at the G mining reunion investments, for example, in South America. So they're about building regional players. I guess I've looked at that when I've looked at Rupert. I've gone, it's earlier stage, and we need to work through the studies and the permitting. But I would like to be that regional player in that region. Start to think about how we can consolidate things, earn the right really to be the developer of choice in that region. Yeah,
so you don't want to just invest in it; you want to build it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of your past experience, obviously no mines look alike. I made a comment to James when we did an interview before his departure of Ikkari from the outside looks like a bit easier of a mine than perhaps others, given the continuity and the grade and the open pit nature of it. Is that a fair comment now that you've come here and you've had a look at it? What do you think about those sort of mineability?
I do. I think there's a lot of things going for Ikkari. I mean, it's in Finland. It's in a tier 1 jurisdiction. The rules are clear and they're followed. It's, as you say, it's a very continuous, high volume, 10,000 ounces of vertical meter over the first 240, 250 meters. It's got this year that those results on the MET test work showing a plus 95% recovery. It's got a lot of things going for it. So from the standpoint of coming in and as a business that can produce cash flow, I think it does have a lot of. I wouldn't call it straightforward, but I would say it's got a lot of advantages as deposits go. So that's how I would characterise that. There's still a lot of work to do, of course, to do the studies, get the permits, do the construction and get it into cash flow. But I think showing that path and knocking those things off one by one will give shareholders and investors a lot of confidence.
Is there any similarities with the mines that you've built in WA or some of the mines you've worked on in Africa that you can see with Ikkari, or how different are they to your past experience?
Look, it's a whole ore leach, CIL. So it's not unusual in terms of the flow sheet. It's not unusual in terms of the mining. So I think in terms of comparing it to other mines, those things are well within the bounds of what you would normally see. Now it's in Lapland, so you've got winter, summer differences, and you've got ice loads on buildings, and you've got those things to consider. But it's got good parameters to work in.
Obviously, you had a PEA that was released a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
How different do you think this PFS needs to be to the PEA, and what's the evolution of this thing looking like in your mind?
Well, I think the evolution, we've got more geological knowledge now, so we've got a lot of this resource into indicated, which means that we can publish a reserve, which is the biggest change, I guess. We've changed how we look at the underground a little bit, so we're looking at different mining methods for the underground. We're looking at the scheduling slightly differently. So there's a few changes. Obviously, between 2022 and today, we've seen cost increases across the industry. That's something that that will come across in the PFS, I think. And what I think it will do is it will give people confidence that the work is progressing. The work's of a good standard. Some of the work is we're still progressing work, especially on the hydrogeology, that's going to feed into a feasibility study down the line. So I think people will see that there's good quality work being done. It shows the economics, shows the high quality nature of the deposit and the mine plan. And I think that'll give people confidence as we move forward.
Yeah, because obviously when you released the PA, it was sort of indicating that you would be one of the lowest quartile cost producers globally, just on this asset alone, right? So is there still the potential for that now that you do have a deeper understanding? Obviously, usually what you find when people do a lot more definition drilling is the ore body gets worse. I think a lot of people would agree that Ikkari looks better, which is a good thing. Like you said, costs have changed and whatnot. But in terms of a global standard, obviously you can't say too much because the PFS hasn't come out yet. But are you still pretty happy with how Ikkari's going to stack up globally? Well,
look, I think the global cost curve has shifted over that period of time. So I'm still confident that it'll be in the better half of the cost curve, if I say that. Just because, and I say that with confidence because of the low strip, the relative high grade compared to the global average of open pit mines. It's got those elements that make it very very strong in terms of those outputs. Those won't change materially. The costs will go up, but I think the cost curve has shifted as well.
Yeah, the cost curve definitely gone with it. Yeah. One of the main, not criticisms, but one of the main questions that I remember when the PA was released was you did have a bit of a dip in production profile as you were shifting from the open pit to the underground. Has that been addressed in the new PFS? Again, I don't want to ask you questions that you can't answer, but
look, I think for me personally, a lot of my career has been in underground mining. So I still believe that there's work to be done around the underground. So there's probably some more trade-off studies, and it's kind of the case now. Do we go and do more trade-offs, or do we publish the PFS? And my view is, let's publish the PFS. Let's identify maybe there are some other opportunities, but we can't talk about those until we've done the work. So let's publish the PFS. If there's other opportunities, let's look at those and publish those in time when it makes sense.
Yeah, okay. All right. So what are you mostly focusing on now then? Obviously over the next, you've got the PFS coming out now. I guess your main focus is really just like you just said there, you've got to get this thing delivered. Yes. Looking a bit further forward into that, what do you think the turnaround time would be to a feasibility study?
Yeah, I think next year is an important year for us. In fact, the week after next, I'm back up on site, and we're spending just kind of 2.5 days with the team to really map out what are those key milestones for us over the next probably 3 to 5 years till the time that Ikkari comes into production. So I'm excited about interacting with the team in that way. But if we just roll forward to 2025, obviously having the PFS and being able to talk to those numbers in the market, I think that's a really critical milestone. The EIA program, so we're continuing through that work. That will be critical. We'll submit that report to the authorities probably sometime in H2 next year. So that's a very important piece of work that goes towards your permitting. So that's probably the next most critical thing. And then there's scoping the feasibility study. So that's taking the PFS, looking, are there any other opportunities or risks that we really need to cover off, and working out our construction model for the feasibility study. And that's the point where we really need to look at what's the team, what's the owner's team, what are the additional skills and experience that we need to bring into this to take it through that next phase.
Okay. And how should, just as just looking at this PFS or looking forward to it, is this just a PFS just on Ikkari alone, or are we still looking at tying in part of Ara towards the back end of the mine plan? Are we now able to tie in a bit of Heinä Central, Heinä South, any of these other satellite targets?
No, so this will be a PFS on Ikkari.
Okay.
So those other opportunities won't come into the mine plan. We're still working on Heinä and some of those satellite deposits. Part of Ara we've left out of the plan for now. Again, potential upside down the line. And for me, I haven't even really looked at part of Ara as yet. So there's still other opportunities, and of course the exploration, as we started with, that exploration leg is still a very important part of the Rupert story. We need to continue to look for those for the next Ikkari and those satellite deposits that will support the long term.
So how much of a focus now does, obviously once the PFS is out, that period before you make your final DFS or feasibility study, how much of that period within that time frame is really the exploration? How important does that become in terms of drilling out these satellite targets to potentially, because you've got to work out really, is it better to put some of these satellites at the front end or at the back end or where they're going to be?
Yeah. Right? I just think it comes down to being methodical about that exploration. One of the things I think that the team has done really well is they're very staged in how they do that and understanding what is the potential of each deposit before going to the next stage. So I just think we need to maintain that discipline. You're right. Then there's decisions around capital allocation. Is that is there more? Is there less? But I'm looking forward to answering those questions as we do the work.
Yeah, good. Okay. And in terms of who's leading the charge now on the exploration side, who's the guy at the helm there, sort of pointing the drill bit nowadays?
So Kali on site is our exploration manager. He's been with Rupert, I think it's about 8 years now. He's very familiar with the setting and the rocks and the methodology, and so Kali's leading that for us, and I'm very excited to continue working with him on that.
All right, I'm not going to push you too much on geology because I know, one, you're new to the company and you're not a geologist, so I'm not going to do that. In terms of it's good in a way because obviously you got the relevant experience and the skills and whatnot to come in and potentially build this mine. But you're somewhat restricted in what you can say really, because obviously we've got to wait for these results and you can't whatnot. But in terms of your plan or the way that you're looking at this company, maybe you can just set out this pathway to production. I know you mentioned some of it with the EIA and something else, but what do the next couple of years look like for you? I assume you want to be here you want to see the job done. How long in your mind is that going to take, and what's the pathway to get there?
Yeah, so the pathway, I mean, studies are a big part for now, but probably the biggest and most important piece of work that we have, certainly in 2025, is to bring this EIA program to a point where we can submit an EIA report. From there, the authorities issue a statement on that, and that might involve a follow-up, or it might, if we've done a good enough job, it might be that it's kind of ratified. But you would expect there's some backwards and forwards on that, and from there we're in a position to start applying for the relevant permits. So Calibre mine, the Sibanye mine, it's a lithium mine, but from the statement to permits, they were 12 months. So that's kind of the benchmark for us. So if we can have permits around end of 26, while that work is happening, we're doing the DFS. In parallel to the DFS, we're talking to looking at different ways of how we fund the construction, debt, equity, and so on. And we do that in parallel. So then by 2027, we're ready to make a investment decision and construct. Broadly 2 years from there, we're in production.
Okay, so 2029, you're pouring some gold.
Yeah, I think that's I think we need to be positive on the best case. In Finland, there's a very prescribed process. People can object at various points along the way, and that can take up some time. But I think the challenge for us is to do the work in such a way, and based on what I've seen so far, there's a lot of high quality work and a lot of work going into working closely with the community and the various stakeholders to make sure that they understand the work that we're doing and supportive of the work that we're doing. So I think that's another critical kind of strategic element of the business. This has been well set up before I started, but we obviously need to continue that well.
Okay. So I'm just thinking from like an investor's perspective, it's you've got around 4.5-5 years until potentially first gold pour, right? Maybe even a little bit sooner than that.
But if you think discovery hole to pouring gold in that time, that would be a phenomenal.
Well, you're looking at like 8-9 years, which is, yes. I think if you look at, I think in Canada now, from discovery hole in certain jurisdictions, I think some of the averages are getting up to like 20, 22, 20.
Exactly. So it would be a phenomenal.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, but I guess from an investor entering now into Rupert, it's obviously you're de-risking, and the value of the ounces in the ground should obviously go up as you de-risk the project and you go through permitting and obviously further studies. But I guess the benefit of you guys, which again brings us back to where we were at the beginning, is that you are still actively exploring the belt, right?
Yes.
And I think you've even got some JV partners on the belt now that are also doing some exploration as well, right? So,
yes. Yeah.
In terms of I guess it's this dual approach, isn't it? And it's good that you're keeping that.
Yes.
To keep the options open for.
Yeah, I think that's critical. I mean, I think from an investment point of view, sometimes the studies and the permits can just be kind of like noise, whereas the exploration and continuing to invest in putting drill bits in the ground, I think that's where the excitement can come from. So, I think that's absolutely what you just said is absolutely correct. We've got to do the studies and the work and do it to a very high quality, so we minimise that timeline to cash flow. But we need to keep being methodical, and we need to keep telling people, and we need to understand some of these potential high grade hits that we've got, to understand if they are high grade systems. Maybe the mining needs to be slightly different. Maybe it's not exactly like Ikkari, but it's something else that brings value into the equation. So we've got to keep doing those two things in parallel.
Good. Okay. All right. I think that's a pretty comprehensive overview. Is there anything else that you think shareholders should be aware of now that you're here?
That's a tough one. I think the company has done an excellent job so far. I think James has done an excellent job, especially on delivering Ikkari. The challenge is finding something that is looks as good or looks better than Ikkari, and that's a tough challenge.
I think in fairness, it would be great. I'm sure there are other Ikkaris on that belt as well, right? The odds of there just being one of them is, but I think investors are really more focused on you building the thing.
Yes.
And if another Ikkari pops up along the way, that would be
unbelievable. Yeah. There are some exploration targets. I would term it kind of second generation, where the guys, they started with historic government data, right? And they looked at the structures, and they said, these structures should be the right structures, and lo and behold, you've found an Ikkari. What we're starting to do now is, some of the geophysics is bringing in other geophysics, looking at the resolutions a bit more closely. but also at a bit more depth, so that we can to the east of Ikkari, for example, there's a target where the rocks from a geophysics standpoint look very similar to the signature at Ikkari, but they're 300 meters below surface.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to put a couple of diamond holes in there this winter drill program, just to see what we find and what it shows us. That those types of things. If you've got an Ikkari 350 meters below surface, that changes the game. But it's very early and it's harder to find.
Well, this is the very unpredictable nature of Finland in a way, or the Lapland belt that you're in, is that where there's so much till cover, you might get a sniff through base of till drilling, or you might get a sniff through some geophysics or whatever. But it's very quick, the discovery turnaround, because you've basically got to go put a deep drill hole or put a drill. That's similar to how Ikkari was, right? You got a sniff of some gold normalization in base of till, and then you put a drill hole through it, and all of a sudden you found one of the best discoveries ever made. Yeah. So if it does come, it will come quick, I'd imagine.
Yeah. And look, the other thing I think about is, I guess my background, a lot of time in the goldfields of Western Australia, and you look at how many mines there have had 3 to 5 years reserve life for 20 years. Yeah. The best place to find gold is when you're mining gold. And I think Ikkari at depth, although it doesn't look like it's 10,000 ounces per vertical metre to the centre of the earth, I think once we start mining and we get deeper, the level of understanding we'll get of the structural controls, and we get better positions potentially to drill from in the underground, I think we'll find a lot more ounces just in that little part of Ikkari. So
when you look at the Area 1 map, and you're going a bit eastward along that fault zone, there's so much land that looks
and you've got those faults, and you've got the cross-cutting faults, and you've got stuff that you think there has to be targets here. And if you look, if you flip up to a long section and you look at what's been drilled, we've just scratched the surface based on a few base of till anomalies. So that's a much bigger system that we'll get to learn more about. The best way to learn more about it, not being a geologist, being a mining engineer, the best way to learn more about it is get in and mine it.
Go in and get it out. Yeah. No, good. Graham, thank you very much for your time.
Very welcome.
Thank you.